Welcome back. As in the last session, we have understood about weather, climate and one of its elements, that is atmospheric temperature. In this session also we are going to understand some of the more elements. Likewise, atmospheric pressure and winds. Let us understand the atmospheric pressure. Do you know the air that we breathe has weight because it is made up of number of gases. Thus, we can say that the force exerted against the surface by the weight of air above that surface is known as atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure is measured with an instrument called barometer. The 14th barometer and barograph are the two which is used by the meteorologists, while mountain climbers, sailors, pilots uses Android barometer. The factors which influence the atmospheric pressure are altitude, temperature and moisture. The distribution of atmospheric pressure around the earth is influenced by variation in temperature and rotation of the earth. We shall learn about the various pressure belt through this images that is developed on the planet Earth. While understanding the basic concepts behind the development of pressure belts, we will not take into the considerations the tilt of the axis and the influence of the land-water distribution. Equator divides the globe into southern hemisphere and northern hemisphere. An equatorial belt extends up to 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south. Equatorial region receives nearly vertical rays of the sun, and this heats up the air near the equator. When temperature increases, pressure decreases. So, along the equator we have low pressure, and we call this region as equatorial low pressure belt. The warm air starts rising up into the troposphere, and as warm air is rising, the temperature drops. After rising up to a certain point, it stops rising upwards because it becomes cooler and is obstructed by tropopause. So, the air spreads out. The air starts moving into southern and the northern direction. As the air moving, it becomes denser, and after a certain point, it sinks down to the surface. So, at around 30 degrees north and south, we have sinking air. This sinking air is cool air, so it forms high pressure system. These regions are called as subtropical high pressure belt because these region lies outside the tropical region and at the same time it joins into the tropical region. The sinking air now moves towards the north and south. So, along the equator, the warm air rises, spreads out and cools and sinks down. In this way, it develops convectional currents. At the poles, the sun rays are very much inclined. So we have cold air that sinks. These regions are known as polar heights. In the northern hemisphere, the air moves towards the south, and in southern hemisphere, the air moves towards the north. At this point, we have air coming out from north and south. So, at this point, the air converges and rises up. These regions are known as subpolar lows. So, at 60 degree latitudes, we have low pressure system because we have rising air. Along the equator, the air is rising because of convection, and at subpolar lows, we have rising air because of convergence. This rising air also spreads out, cools and sinks. Same thing happens in the southern hemisphere. On the surface of the earth, along the equator, the winds move from high pressure region to low pressure regions, that is from subtropical heights to the equatorial low in the northern and southern hemisphere. These winds bend to the right in the northern hemisphere, and in the southern hemisphere the winds bend to the left, and this is described as Coriolis effect. The winds bend to the right and left in the northern and southern hemisphere respectively because the earth is spherical in shape and the earth rotates from west to east. In the same way, in between 30 and 60 degree north and south, the wind bends towards the right and left in the northern and southern hemispheres respectively. Even at the polar region, the same phenomenon can be seen. Winds. The variation in atmospheric pressure on the Earth's surface leads to the movement of the air, and the horizontal movement of the air is called winds, and the vertical movement of the air is called air currents. The instrument that used to measure the speed of the wind is called an anemometer, and the one which is used to measure the direction is called wind vane. Wind is affected by the rotation of the earth. Therefore, wind, instead of blowing straight, deflects from its course. This deflection is known as Coriolis effect. Its effect is greatest at poles and zero at the equator. Farrell's law explains this concept of deflection as a freely moving body on the Earth's surface gets deflected to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere due to rotation of the Earth. Based on that, wind is classified into three broad categories. Let's understand the planetary winds. It's also known as prevailing or permanent winds. It includes trade winds, westerlies, and polar winds. Trade winds that blows from northeast to southwest. Therefore, they are known as northeast trade winds. In the southern hemisphere, they blow from the southeast to northwest and are known as southeast trade winds. Westerlies. In the northern hemisphere, they blow from southwest direction, so they are known as southern westerlies. And in the southern hemisphere, they are known as northern westerlies. Polar westerlies blow from polar high pressure to subpolar low pressure belts. They are known as polar northeasterlies in the northern hemisphere and polar southeasterlies in the southern hemisphere. Next is periodic winds. That is also called seasonal winds that do not blow permanently. They are caused due to variation in temperature, atmospheric pressure. The monsoon winds are periodic winds that are caused by differential heating of the land and sea. Land and sea breezes are also periodic winds that occur due to variation in heating land and water. Local winds that occur due to local variations. For instance, in India, Loo, hot and dry winds that originates from Rajasthan blow over the northern plains. Variable winds are too not regular and are of short duration. There are two types of variable winds, cyclones and anticyclones.